first episode with just Grif and I since the first episode that we posted. And since then, we've gotten 23 subscribers. So I'm hoping maybe we can get 24 more subscribers by the time we do another episode like this. We'd still be sub 50, but it'd be an improvement.
But we're trending well.
I am actually really excited for this conversation. And I know it's going to feel like one of those conversations where me and you are just on the phone kind of chopping it up. Because we're talking about speed. And I think a good place to start is you and I obviously work together with the track team at Springfield, specifically the sprinters and jumpers. And I think that opportunity and what came with that position kind of helped us or helped start this journey towards, passion and speed development and trying to get athletes as fast as possible. You are currently a track coach. I work in baseball, but there's nothing I'm more passionate about in human athlete development than trying to get, athletes faster. And you just said before we get on here that speed is the most confusing thing in human development. It's the hardest thing to develop. That's why so many people are searching for the answers. And I think that's what makes it fascinating. And me personally, like the way I learn and the way I like to prescribe and continue to develop is I like to have systems because I think it's easy to then bucket individuals, learn from those buckets, and apply certain stimuli and prescriptions. And so I kind of created a system that I think could stem a really nice conversation and allow me to pick your brain. And the only reason that it's titled the S3 system is because that each bucket within the Venn diagram starts with an S. And so I think a good place to start is kind of going over each one and how they all intertwine and create relationships to help speed development overall. So first bucket, and I would say, likely the most important always is it's a skill. Like speed, like anything else, is a skill. You know that better than anyone. You work in track, you work in a sport where sprinting is the skill, the actual output is the skill. So you spend more time developing the skill itself than someone like me in team sports. So I'm excited to kind of hear how you attack that and what you've seen with that. But just like anything, it requires reps and time to create the most efficient movement possible. The second bucket being software. And when I think software, I think of the nervous system, neural outputs. What does neural rate look like? How is that working to improve coordination, timing of the force production and application, and how important that is in actually creating efficient movement, which hence is going to help the skill. And lastly, I think of structure, like the hardware. So we have our software, and now we have the hardware. It's kind of physical capacity. We know the amount of forces that are applied, transferred upon ground contact when sprinting. The sum of forces systemically, but also to local tissue is massive. We know that. So your body's ability to create capacity via relative strength, stiffness of the system, and just overall resilience is super important for sustaining, repeating, and then expressing super high outputs. So those are kind of the three buckets. And I think it's really important to at least highlight how they connect briefly. We'll go deeper. But I think like anything, it starts with a skill. So obviously those two buckets on the bottom are going to help develop the skill, but the skill also develops the bottom too. And how does it help develop the software? Where we talk about creating a very fast, efficient nervous system that sends super rapid signals. Well, there's no stronger, more potent neural signal that can be sent than actually just going out and sprinting. I think that's probably going to be your most effective exercise in building and refining this electric nervous system that we all dream of. And the other side of that, the massive amount of force relatively to each area that is going to be applied. Like you're reaching 8 to 9 times body weight in certain muscle groups. So that's exposing tissue to super high force, high strains and forces that aren't going to be met in the weight room. So like there's going to be a resilience and tolerance that's built from just sprinting alone. Like when you look at sprinters, at least when I look at sprinters, a lot of them are built. You know what I mean? You have your tall, skinny, super elastic guys. Yeah. A lot of those guys are physical, man. And I get they train. You can't tell me that there's no muscle hypertrophy benefit to just going out and sprinting all the time. You know what I mean? So, and like I've talked about before, like to be resilient to the actual task, the actual skill, you have to go do it. And that's going to help build physical capacity. The connection to the bottom, and I know I'm kind of rambling now, but I wanted to provide like a brief overview, is higher quality neural output is going to allow the body to use its physical capacity more effectively. When we talk about coordination, timing, just efficiency as a whole, we built this structure, this physical foundation. Well, the signaling that's going to be occurring from the software is going to help us express output better. On the other side of that, your structure is going to support the software because you need resilient tissues for higher quality neural output, right? So that's kind of a brief overview of this Venn diagram, this system that I created. And I think as we get into it, what makes it, really fun is like the distribution of each aspect is going to be individualized based on the person and their demands. So what training looks like via the skill, the software, the structure for each individual is going to be different. I think that's what makes it really special and really unique, and what makes, kind of the chase and the journey towards getting faster, something super worthwhile, because it takes a lot of creativity, a lot of trial and error, and just learning from each thing. So I know I kind of spitballed a lot. It was more of a just kind of getting information out there, but I'd love to just hear kind of your initial thoughts on just this Venn diagram I created as a whole, and because you're the speed expert, so I want to learn from you.
I wish I was a speed expert. No, but yeah, like I said before we started, like speed is such a difficult thing to comprehend at times. And I think like with anything, like of course someone has initial gains to say a program, like, you work with a lot of guys who are novices when it comes to, like, you're getting young guys coming over from, different programs, different countries. And a lot of those guys have probably just played baseball their whole lives. Like they probably haven't done a whole lot of like formal training when it comes to speed or weight room or anything like that. So, those guys see gains initially. And like with anything, it's like, how do you continue to elevate once that person is getting to kind of towards their ceiling, if you will?
Right.
So, that's always the question. Like, and how do you measure that? Like, how do you know when someone is near their ceiling?
Right.
But eventually, like, you see progress slow down, and that's why you have Olympians in track and field who are, the 100-meter guys are training, 4 years for the Olympics to try to take 100th of a second off their time. Right. Like when you think about it, like we can't even really tell what that is. Like there's no visual difference to us.
Yeah.
Like the human eye can't even see that. So to comprehend that they're training for 4 years to try to do that is pretty mind-boggling. So when you hear of guys who are towards that level, who are hitting, like taking off 1/10 of a second, that's insane. Like that's mind-boggling. I guess one point I just wanted to make about the system, is I love systems. They help our brains organize, but every system has its limitations.
For sure.
And I think with any good system, like what you do is you continue to evolve the system, and you kind of poke it and prod it a little bit and see, and like as you make those small changes, you're able to kind of like for lack of a better term, just evolve the system.
Right.
So yeah, that's really my first initial thought on the system. But when I was kind of gathering my thoughts on the 3 categories as a whole, there's so much crossover between the 3.
Right.
And that's why I do think it fits so nicely as this Venn diagram, because all these buckets and categories are feeding into one another. So I do think that there is a lot of crossover here and a lot of good stuff to hit on.
I think it's important to note as well, and we kind of touched on this briefly before hopping on here. Like, if you're looking in the mirror and you're an athlete that's, not necessarily fast, or doesn't think that getting faster is really going to be, make the difference in your performance, I think it's important to note that although you may think that running speed is not a KPI for you, like you said, getting faster never hurt anyone. One, right? There's a reason they say speed kills. And 2, in some capacity, velocity and your expression of speed is a KPI in your sport, whatever it may be.
Right.
So, you might have a guy on the diamond that, can't necessarily, he's a red, yellow on the bases, or he can't go. You better be able to swing it fast, hit it hard, and throw it fast, right? So we're probably going to dive into sprinting a lot today, but overall expression of velocity and speed is important for every sport, no matter what. So I think that's important to note because like you're going to have those guys that they might get faster, but they may never be fast, right? There's just those people. I'm one of them, it feels like. But there are things that you need to do with a lot of velocity to be successful in your certain sport. So I think that's important to lead with.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like there are some sports where sprinting speed or like sprinting velocity doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
I don't think boxing coaches care how fast their guys can run. Like it doesn't matter. They'd rather just run them for, 12,
how fast those guys' hands.
12 400s with a minute recovery between. Like that's what it seems like. But exactly. Like some software wise, like, man, that guy could punch me in the face and I can't see it coming. So something's happening there that isn't necessarily like sprinting speed related, but for most sports, like sprinting, like sprint speed falls somewhere in terms of like the KPI hierarchy.
Right.
In my sport, it's number one.
Right.
In baseball, it might be further down the list.
And I think that what I love about this Venn diagram is that based on the sport and those demands, it's like the distribution of each bucket is going to be different, right? So your sport is heavily practices the skill, the actual sprinting. Mine is less based on time and resources. There's other skills to develop. It doesn't mean there's not a time for it or a way to apply it. It's just the distribution of each is going to be different. I think that's what makes it, really unique.
Yeah.
I think what we do now is kind of just dive into each one, kind of gather our thoughts on each, how we like to develop it, have seen it developed, and kind of let the conversation go from there. So let's always start at the top, man. Like in anything you're doing, the top of the pyramid is going to be the actual skill itself. Like your hardware can be impressive, right? You can have immense physical capacity. You can have a pretty, quick nervous system. Like you can be a good athlete and still stink. And the other way around is you can be the opposite. You may not move fast. You may not be the most explosive individual. Right. Physically, you might not look the biggest or the strongest or the most resilient, and you can be really good at your sport. So I think we start with the skill. And I think it kind of gets overlooked how sprinting itself is a skill, and developing that skill is going to help improve your outputs like anything else. And I want to kind of throw it over to you because you're the track coach.
Yep. When I think of the skill, I think of splitting things into quote different phases or different portions of a sprint. So the skill of starting in track is a lot different than the skill of running at max velocity. They're two completely different things. Just because you're good at starting does not mean that you're going to be good at the other skill. Like there's not really a super strong correlation there. They're pretty dissimilar from one another. So the first thing I want to say is just point out that the skill is very dependent upon, it's very specific to the portion of the sprint. And then the other thing I think of with skill is the ability to time your body appropriately and then coordinate your limbs in position. And ultimately that is what the limiting factor is when it comes to max velocity, is just the eventually coordination falls apart at high velocities, which is what leads to speed decrement. So think of a 100-meter dash. The best guys in the world are hitting their max velocity somewhere around 60 meters or so. Yep. When Bolt ran 9:58, it was like almost 70 meters into the race, which is pretty insane to think that he was what we would, say is accelerating to almost 70 meters. Like,
I can't even wrap my head around 9:58.
We're hitting our top speed at like 10, 15 meters, probably. Like, like my best guys are hitting at 30 to 35, probably. maybe 40, maybe 40.
Yep.
And then like the best guys in the world can maintain, say, their top speed zone in a 10 meter, like in a 10-meter zone.
Right.
They can usually maintain for 2 10-meter zones. So we know, say you're hitting at 60, you're from 60 to 80, you're at top speed. From 80 to 100, you're slowly decelerating.
Right.
And then the goal is how much, like damage control, essentially.
Exactly.
Like how can I limit how much I'm slowing down?
Yep.
So the coordination there is huge. Timing of limbs in space. And that comes down to, I think a lot of it comes down to like hitting what we call as coaches positions. Like that helps our eye to see and to look at positions. Like if you take a still shot of someone in their max velocity posture, like relatively speaking, of course, that there's a continuum of these things, but generally speaking, we have some sort of technical model that we want to see
For sure.
for the skill.
Stu breaks it up, and the way he words is a systemic interaction of locomotor subpatterns. I think that's the way he puts it. And I really like kind of how he breaks these things up. Like you said, man, systems, buckets, things like that, they really help you organize. And so I'm a fan of them. But I know you kind of put me on Stu, and I love listening to him because a lot of his information to me is very digestible. Smart guy, knows a ton, works with a lot of Olympic athletes, but I can understand what he's saying and digest it and apply it. And I really like the way he broke it up. And he's got a figure, like a diagram as well. I don't have it on me, but he kind of breaks it up into 4 different parts. So foot ground interaction. So how well are you managing like the load exchange with the ground? Your foot is your base of support. And ultimately what you give to the ground's going to give back to you. So maximizing that interaction. 2 being propulsion, hip extension. You're driving force in the proper direction. Less important, he talks in this a lot, is hip flexion, but still like that recovery limb is really important ahead of the next contact. In sprinting, like at least the motion is kind of like a wheel, man. Like your front side mechanics are going to impact your backside mechanics and vice versa. And so instead of looking at it at like, how can I, the front side's the problem or the back side's the problem, because I think a lot of people kind of fall into this trap. They're all working together. So where is the technical issue occurring and how can we clean up the entire motion?
Absolutely.
And the last one being spinal engine, which I really like that he touches on.
Yep.
And he talks about how your hips undulate and oscillate and your shoulders counter undulate and oscillate, and the relationship between those things. Because when you watch the elite sprinters, the Bolts, the Lyles, none of them are stiff. They're very expressive. There's a lot of rotation going on. And there's, Joel talks about it a lot. I'm actually reading an article on it now, but like the amount of rotational forces that are present to help direct linear movement at high velocity is unbelievable. So, and so like when I think about my environment and trying to clean up some of these patterns with the time and resources that I have, I like to break it up, into those things. So like, what are we doing to drive hip extension? How am I improving the foot ground interaction? What am I including to help the efficiency of the spinal engine? And then where can I dose in, any pieces that I think would be beneficial via hip flexion as well, even though I don't view it as, necessarily a priority.
Those, and he always ranks those. So I've heard him talk about how he will rank those as a KPI for the different athletes that he works with.
Yep.
Personally, what I've seen, and I know he said this as well, is like that spinal engine piece is more so, that's kind of the new sexy thing.
Right.
That
was at the bottom of the way
that does not tend to be the needle mover for the most of the population.
But I just think when he loves to talk about expression, fluidity, and I think that's one of those pieces that is just present when those things come together.
Yep, absolutely. But I was actually so surprised this year as to how many kids that I picked up with on how poor their like foot to ground interaction actually is.
Yeah, go deeper on that.
The amount of kids that I see striking with a heel strike,
We got some heel strikers.
It's insane. And like, this is not to be confused. Like, the heel does touch the ground in max velocity. Very normal for it to touch the ground. When the hips cross over the knee, it's normal for the heel to drop, puts the Achilles on stretch, and then it can unload into propulsion.
Yep.
We have kids who are reaching out in front and literally striking flat foot in front.
Is there a leak of energy there?
Like that. What's that?
Is there a leak of energy when that happens?
I'm worried that they're freaking hurt their hamstring is what I'm worried about. They're like this, leaning way forward. They're literally almost tripping over themselves. They're spinning their wheels so fast. Their spikes are facing into the sky. They have no front side mechanics. So then, this goes back to the point you're making about the wheel. So, okay, what is the problem?
Right.
What is the problem? I guess my brain always kind of first goes to that foot to ground interaction. Is like kind of where I think about the kind of the pyramid starting. If the foot cannot contact the ground appropriately in relation to the center of mass, how is the rest of the wheel going to function?
For sure. So
that's kind of what I think about with that. But no, there's so much low hanging fruit for me with the foot to ground, but also the hip extension, especially.
Oh man.
Like, and some of it is not necessarily just a poor pattern. It's just like, you got no horsepower there.
For sure.
We got nothing.
Yep.
I'm
one of them. Yeah. And he breaks like those sprinters up into buckets. And you see a lot of guys that are like spinners, like the very short strided rapid contacts. Like those guys lack a lot of hip extension. Their time in air is very short.
Very short.
Time on ground usually longer than you want. And so it's very interesting how all those come together. And one thing that I take with me is like, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on hip flexion and hip flexion drills, your A drills, things of that nature.
Yep.
I'm not a fan of them because I think when you only have a certain amount of time to drive or provide a certain stimuli in hopes that you're driving a certain adaptation, it's like it's not the needle mover.
Right.
Hip extension is. And I think how explosively you extend the hip is going to impact how much hip flexion you're also accessing. And overall what that pattern is going to look like. So do you guys do A drills? I know they're very common in the track community. I'm not saying they're not good.
Yeah.
But it's like if I only had a certain amount of time, I would side with a drill with, the primary focus of that drill is to drive hip extension.
Yeah, we do A drills. I think with anything, it depends on what are you putting the emphasis on in the drill. So you can see A drills coached where you get kids are like bending over at the waist, they're kind of like crunching into it.
Right.
The emphasis is really on the bringing up of the leg. The way I tend to coach the A drill is the force is going down into the track. So it's more of a snap down and more of an extension from the hip and then the quad more so than it is on the way up. So like in the way that I think about that drill, I don't necessarily think about it as a quote, a hip flexion type drill. But I do know what you're saying. And I think more people kind of coach it in the hip flexion type sense than
drive your knee up as high as you can.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just don't really, I've seen it coached like that before at different places I've been. Again, it never really made much sense to me.
Yep.
I know the hip flexors play a role in sprinting for sure. And the way I know that is the day after I sprint, my hip flexors are usually pretty sore.
Yep.
So my hypothesis is it's probably kind of the first initiation after like the foot is leaving the ground, like after toe off, the initial like bringing back through of like the trail leg, heels recovering.
How quickly that leg is recovering is important.
Right. But at some point, the angular velocity and the angular momentum is going to take over. Yeah. And like, Dude, I don't coach my kids to say, I don't ever tell my kids to get their knees up. Like, I think that's a
No,
freaking,
I think
that's stupid.
let's. No, I think we talk about this later. No, I think we talk about it now because I think it's part of the skill. You just said you don't tell your guys, bring their knees up. Do you tell your guys to stay low?
I've never said that.
Me neither. And I think
Not
that's
that.
for some. That's like,
And I can tell which of them have been told in the past to stay low.
Yeah,
because they're running bent over at the waist.
What are your thoughts on that? Why is it ineffective to you?
Well, I think it's an ineffective cue because it's completely separating the body and kind of there's disunity there in my opinion. So like the staying low portion is kind of just what we see as coaches, and it is more of a product of like how the force is being applied into the ground at that point in time. Like it's very at that point in time very horizontal force dominant compared to vertical, right? So in order for that to happen, in order to overcome inertia, we need some sort of horizontal lean. We need some sort of forward lean. But unfortunately, what I think that leads to and what I've seen that leading to for kids is complete disunity in their upper and lower half. And it leads to a lot of kids leaving their hips behind them. So they're breaking at the waist, they're hanging over, their chest is pointing towards the ground. Or for some kids, it's just their head. They just keep their head down. So they're running like this. Like, okay, we're changing where the center of mass is, and that's ultimately slowing us down.
Right. What's unique too is that I could put, we might get into archetyping a little later. We could put two individuals next to each other and just tell them to do a 15-yard sprint, and they might look totally different.
Way different.
You might have one individual that's naturally lower and one that wants to get more upright quickly, depending on how much time they're, comfortable spending on the ground compared to the other person, right? And that's okay, right? That individual chooses that strategy for a reason.
Yeah.
So like, how can we maximize their personal strategy instead of try to, universalize what it should look like for everyone?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I just felt like that was important to touch on.
Yeah.
Kind of talking about how the skill impacts other things. We talk about, you get an electric athlete in front of you, right? And these people have these nervous systems, these softwares that are so fast, so impressive. It feels like a gift, right? It's something that you're like, I wish I had that, right? And there's obviously genetic implications that play into that. But it's not, it is a trainable quality. You know what I mean? You can develop a faster nervous system. There's things you can do. And in large part, you need to move fast. And there's nothing faster than going out and expressing yourself in the fastest way possible. In doing that, like, you're going to get stronger, dude, naturally. And so I know we've had brief conversation around this. I know Tony Holler's not the biggest weight room guy in his, feed the cats theory and things like that. Like, where do you stand on that in terms of like how important the weight room is? Is it is it very individual? Because like you can go out. There's been Olympic sprinters that don't lift at all, and they're physical and they're obviously fast. And there's Olympic sprinters that love to train, love to lift, still fast. Yeah. So it's like, where do you think the happy median is? Like, where is that conversation with an athlete that's like, I don't like lifting. I don't think it's gonna be beneficial for me. I don't want to get slower. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I still think the weight room is important. I do for speed development, and the stronger correlation is going to be seen earlier in a run, for example, as the velocity is slower and the force requirements are higher from like muscle actions per se. Yeah. Soft tissue, tendons, fascia, that kind of stuff is not necessarily helping as much in the first few steps of an acceleration, for example. So of course the best translation of the weight room is going to be seen in the first step, like out of a block, for example.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that the value doesn't end there, because I also see the weight room as being a way to improve software.
Yeah.
So really where I think I stand with the software aspect is, yes, sprinting absolutely is. Well, I guess I can't say absolutely because I can't absolutely say anything. But
Right.
sprinting is important in terms of software development.
Sure.
Like moving at the maximum speed that the human body can move is important for sure. But how do we keep that from getting stale as an athlete
Yep.
continues to train? If you have an athlete who's maybe not in our settings per se, because even the older kids that I'm working with are 21, 22 years old. Like they haven't been training for that long, especially some of the males. Like, they're only approaching the prime years of their athletic careers.
Right.
But for some higher level athletes, guys who are in their late 20s, early 30s, how do you keep the same stimulus from getting stale and continue to drive adaptation? That's where I think the interesting conversation about the software really comes into play.
Yeah. And I think another interesting debate that could stem from this is like you have those that kind of believe in the velocity curve, and you have those that think it's a gray area. We know the adaptation that's going to be achieved on each end of that curve, but everything in the middle is gray area. Like, where are you at with moving at a certain velocity in the weight room to induce a certain stimulus that's going to help improve that individual software? So it's like, I think it's very individual dependent. Like, you're not going to have everyone go in there and move at the same load or same external load, same intensity. Obviously the velocity is going to change as a result. It's like, where are you at on that?
Yeah, this is definitely an area that I need to continue to improve.
Yeah, me too. I know you can't tell me, at least at this point in my understanding, you can't tell me that between 0.8 and 0.95 is your power zone. And if you do a rep at 0.79 or at 0.96, you're not training that quality, right? Or whatever it may be. And like, I still don't know the difference between strength, speed, and speed strength, right? Like, I'm not convinced based on one application and results that those small increments and differences in velocity zones is making like a drastic impact in adaptation driven.
Yep.
Or stimulus applied.
When I think of all those different speeds and velocities and the different like force application and those kinds of things, I don't necessarily think about it just from a weight room perspective. So those things are oftentimes in the program, even if it's not quote like a weight room based exercise. So like we do a lot of med ball throws. That's to me like that is part of our power training.
For sure.
We might be throwing med balls underhand, overhead, as high as we can. And what we'll do throughout the year is we'll change the load of that. So earlier in the year, we'll start with heavier med ball.
Yeah.
As we get later in the year, we're favoring velocity. So we're moving away from the force aspect of things.
Yep.
You might start with a 20 pounder. We'll move to a 10 pounder by the end of the year. So I also think of resisted sprinting. To me, that's a sense of power development in a sense, however you want to define that. But like that fits into that category for me.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, that's a skill development there, resisted sprinting or replacing a constraint, developing software with a high output.
Yep.
And we're also developing structure because for a lot of kids, that's sort of a strength training exercise.
Is there individuals that you've worked with, or just certain individuals in general, based on the way they're built, how they express themselves, that you wouldn't even touch intensities, over 80%, 85%? Or do you think there's always a place for like maximal intent external load application with athletes?
I think in a weight room sense, like the young kids, like I don't know if they really need to go over 80%, honestly. I don't know if it's
some guys, I don't think super compressive exercises are necessary.
Yeah, but even for some of the younger kids, for example, so say we get a freshman in, I don't know if we like, do I need to put 90% of his max on his back? Like he's so new to it. Like, he's gonna see the gains no matter what. We could put a 15-pound kettlebell in his hands.
Right. Right.
Where when it comes to archetype, that's a whole different ballgame.
How much of it do you think is genetic, right? Or would you say that more importantly, the ceiling is going to be really impacted by genetics? So like obviously individuals are going to have heightened ceilings compared to others based on, you know, a bunch of different things, genetics being one of them. But you just have these kids that have like this innate ability to one, time themselves and coordinate themselves, their body, their center of mass in space way better than others.
Yep.
And then you have these kids where like you're doing all these things to help this individual move faster, and it just doesn't seem like that their nervous system wants
Not
to.
working.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's obviously trainable. It's obviously something that can be developed through this, you know, kind of 3-part relationship and more, where I'm not saying that this Venn diagram covers everything. It doesn't, right?
Right.
But like, how much of this do you think is innate? I think this is just kind of conversation we're having. Like, I can do everything right for the rest of my life and still never run a sub 10-second 100. There's just nothing I can do to do that.
No, nothing.
You know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah. Of course, some of it's innate. What's the percentage of it? I have no idea. And that's a semantic argument that I think anyone would agree that there's, of course, some sort of innate ability to it. Like everyone has some sort of genetic ceiling that they play. But what I think of is what are some of the things that we did as children that then impact what our potential is later on in our athletic career. During developmental years, when the brain is more plastic and it's more formable and more trainable, what were we doing that could then impact who we can become?
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily an innate piece, but that's something that when you grow up, you're like, dang, maybe I should have done more of this or done more of that, or tried this or tried that. So those are always like, hindsight is in this situation, not even 2020, but like when you look back and reflect on it, you think, how did me doing this when I was a child influence my skill development? So like for me and for you, like, you know, we played baseball growing up.
Yep.
A lot of baseball. Like I stepped away from it eventually, but one thing I have not lost from playing baseball is hand-eye coordination.
Yep.
I've always had good hand-eye coordination, and it's from playing baseball.
Yeah.
I know it is. I played a ton of catch growing up. I started playing young.
I think this bucket can really like show its colors, true colors. I mean, obviously you have those, like we were talking about, those athletes that are just special, right? And this is still a trainable quality, but there's going to be some. But I think that this bucket and a different end of it really can like express itself in team sports. So we know that input's going to drive output, and the quality of that input's going to drive the quality of that output. And there's so much reactivity and chaos that is involved in team sport. And you can just go out and watch a game, whatever sport it is, and understand which athletes, just their game speeds it's at a different speed
level. Yeah. Different level.
That might not be in part because they run faster. No. But man, can they react to whatever external stimuli is in their environment way quicker, and they can make a decision a lot quicker based on that. And so I think when it comes to developing software in that manner, there's so much creativity that can be involved. So like I know with my guys last year, like we obviously gamified the shit out of things because I think there's a really strong place in that. But as well, man, just like, and I know we've kind of spoke about like OODA loop, but like just challenging that loop between input. So observe, orient, decide, and act. So like input, process, act, and then learn from that action. I think that's another piece of this software bucket that's really powerful for a lot of athletes. And I think you need to separate that self sometimes from like the skill work, because naturally, like probably the more conscious your sprinting is, or the more external cues you're applying, slower you're going to run, right? So I want to try to make that as expressive and subconscious in nature as possible. But I think there's a time and place that requires a lot of cognition and decision making and reactivity and creativity and just learning from that. And I think aside from the game, like gamifying part of that, it's like just exposing your athletes to chaotic environments in preparation for the chaotic environment that they're going to be a part of. Like, just like anything else, you hear people say a lot, like, we want practice to be harder than the game. Like, I want to challenge the shit out of my guys and their ability to make the right decision and make it quickly. And that can come from so many different, stimuli that's being applied.
Yeah.
But I think that's a unique part of that bucket that I think there's a lot of like low hanging fruit there as well.
Yeah.
Like, you can have a guy with a burst goal in team sport and you can get him faster and still be, confused on why he's not getting the balls in the gap. Well, like, where is that ball in relation to, off the bat and in contact in the air when he's actually making his first move and reacting compared to, someone else that's a plus outfielder, right? So.
Yeah, and for me, when I think about, you talk about making practice look like the game. For us, that looks like, I'm training sprinters. Like, it's
surprise sprint.
It's a highly neurological task.
Yes.
So we are going to do things that are highly neurological.
Yep.
With the understanding of those things take time to recover from.
It's a high cost.
High cost. Yes, exactly. High cost. So we sprint fast. We might sprint with some load. We might sprint heavy and fast. We're going to throw things far. We're going to jump far. Right. Yeah. So like we do a lot of things that are high neural, like highly taxing.
Yep.
But if you want to sprint faster, like I feel like at some point you have to do that. There's a lot of systems out there. Like,
yeah.
So like Clyde Hart, legendary coach for Baylor, like he's known for just absurd amounts of volume in practices and stuff. So they had a very successful, like long sprints group, 400 guys, 400 hurdlers. But dude, they would just do volume, like thousands and thousands of meters of volume at practice. And they'd ramp up from the fall. And like their warm up would be like jog a mile and a half type stuff, like crazy.
Yeah.
That guy had success.
Yeah, it worked.
Trained a lot of like 45-second guys in the 400. So, but the other thing to think about in track too is like how much is too much.
I think that's every sport. I think
of the same stimulus, right? Because in track, yes, you want it to look like the sport, but if you're also going and racing, like you can just at the same time easily overdo it and do too much in practice,
yep.
And it leaves you dead for Mite.
And I think that's any sport because I battle with this all the time. It's like, what's the appropriate dose and when is the appropriate dose? So it's like, we only have so much time to train the skill, right? So I feel it's very necessary to train that skill in some capacity, okay? So you have to sprint. And obviously at my level, it's more applying certain constraints, putting them in positions where I think their body can self-organize itself into a pattern that I think is beneficial instead of a lot of external cues and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's a high-stress environment, okay? That's expensive neurologically. Then we try to expose them to these different forms of reaction and decision-making and this software piece on the side. Once again, that takes a lot of cognitive processing. That's highly neurologically expensive. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we get in the weight room to build the most robust, resilient athlete possible. And at that point, it's like that guy's coming into the weight room with 70% of himself, and I'm asking him to work at the highest intent possible. So I'm not saying that all of them aren't necessary, but it's how much, man. It's like what is the dose? And that, I think that's different for everyone, but I also think there's not a right and wrong answer. Like that guy had a lot of volume, had success. You have other coaches that do, like Tony Holler, I said him, he's the best example. Like that dude, they do the bare minimum, right? In terms of volume. They get in, they stimulate, they don't annihilate, and they get out. And he has success too. So it's like, I think just what you believe in and how your athletes are responding to that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about too is like think about it from a weightlifting perspective. Like we always learn about the size principle. And say you want to do a set of 3 versus a set of 10. If you're going to do a set of 10, like you probably need that set of 10 needs to be close to failure.
Yep.
And you can achieve almost a similar adaptation per se, because by rep 8, 9, and 10, you're now recruiting large motor units.
Yep.
Where during reps 1 through 7, you weren't.
Yep.
So, if you're going to run 10 by 300 at practice, reps 1 through 7, you're like, maybe it's not that difficult, but 8, 9, and 10, you're smoked. And by the end, you're fried. And now you've made the adaptation you want to make. So it's like, from a physiological standpoint, like I don't necessarily know exactly what's happening.
Where do you stand on like?
But I also believe in the said principle of specificity.
For sure. Where do you stand with coaches, athletes, individuals not wanting to train under a certain velocity because they're afraid to get slow? Right? The notion of that. We know that the nervous system is the best adapter on the planet. It's going to adapt to the stimuli that's provided. Yeah. It's like, are you a believer in like moving slow, get slow? Because like you think about it like in broad terms, it makes sense. But then you see guys that train heavy, train slow, and they're fast because of the, obviously the things that are being driven from that, very heavy movement, whatever it may be.
I think over time, yes, I do believe that would happen.
Yep.
I think the conversation then becomes about what is the percentage of training that is
devoted to that level of
heavy and slow versus what is short and fast, if you will. But if I ask someone to go in and squat maximally twice a week for the next 10 years, like I think at some point that's going to have less than ideal returns if they're trying to sprint faster.
About mass, it's not always the lightest sprinters or the fastest sprinters.
Absolutely not. No, I think in that sense, the genetics can choose your event for you.
Yeah.
So Kashani Thompson was never going to be an 800 runner. He's too big.
Boy, is he fast.
But man, was that guy made to run 100 meters,
yeah.
Right? At the same time, let's see, like Tobogo can run anything, honestly. Like he's got a build to run anything. Like he just split 43.5 a few days ago on their 4x4, on Botswana's 4x4. And he ran 19.4 in the 200. You know what I mean? So it's like sub 10 in the 100. Like he can do anything he wants, honestly. He could probably run a great 800.
Yeah.
I think the more important thing for me is the body composition.
Yep.
Everyone's body was, I believe, made to be at close to some sort of weight.
Yep.
Obviously, some people are going to pack on muscle easier than others. I think that's fine to a certain extent.
Your skeleton prefers a certain
for sure. Like for some people, it's really easy to pack on muscle.
Yeah.
For others, it's not. And that's fine. Like you don't need to necessarily look a certain way to say run the 100. There's all sorts of different guys. You have guys built like Noah Lyles who might be, skinnier. He's not really skinny. I mean, the guy's still very well muscled.
Yeah, he is.
But he's narrow. Like,
yeah,
let's be honest, he's narrow.
Shane wide.
Shane's wide. Yeah. Like, but they can both be world class in the same event. But they have way different strategies in doing so. Because Shane better be in the lead at 50.
Yep. Or else Noah's going to come.
Yeah.
Yep. I think this could be kind of a nice little segue into structure, because I know at least a correlation that we've seen in our brief careers as strength or sport performance coaches is never really met a fast guy that obviously isn't strong relatively. We know how important that is, and we know how much of that comes from being fast in general. But like, I could see a very untrained individual and they could be very fast, and I guarantee that they can do a bunch of pull-ups.
Dude, at Springfield, man, all the girls were just freaking cranking out. Never lifted before. Nope. Never lifted. Go in there and hit instead of 8 on their first day.
And then you have guys that live in the gym, guys or girls that live in the gym and struggle. Need a band to do 5.
You're right.
There's something there.
There's something there for sure.
Fast runners can rebound their center of mass faster than everyone else. So I think your ability to, like, your relative capabilities, the capacity to have
master your own body mass.
Yeah, your own body masses. Yeah. That translates. But that's where, like, those girls didn't train much. They just did a lot of sprinting, a lot of training in track and field. And look at the systemic benefit they got from it. Like, they weren't just ripping pull-ups or ripping up her body, but they can go and do it. Yep. It's like there's something there where the software development, the neural benefit you get from actually going out and doing the skill is then creating a more resilient, robust, impressive structure just on its own.
It's not necessarily something I planned on looking for, but I think the one day I literally just came to the office, I'm like, dude, you know what? Like, all these girls can do just like
10 pull-ups. Like,
pull-ups, and like they've never trained.
What's her name? She was hanging with one arm, like, easily.
Yeah, Abby.
I'm
like, Abby, you've never trained before. What are you doing?
Dude, like, the most impressive hangs I've ever seen. I just know that when you're really fast, you're also very, very strong. Yes. And I know we talk about that a lot. Like, you cannot be fast and not strong. You can very well be strong and not fast.
No doubt.
And I guess a lot of that depends on how do you define strength, right? Like, for some, lifting 400 pounds is important.
Yep.
For others, it's how strong relatively am I to my body mass, and how able am I to move my center of mass forward in space faster and more efficiently than anyone else? Because to me, that's the stronger, more impressive athlete.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, like, everything we're doing in the weight room, there's absolutely no guarantee of transfer. You just constantly compressing may not be beneficial for some guys. But I do know that all our fast guys here, normally narrows, but a lot of our fast guys here, like, we had a kid, he's a $160, $170. He likes to say he's 180. It's eyewash. 170 soaking wet, coach. And he does 425 on the trap bar for like an easy 3.
Yeah. And that's where it's our job as coaches to pick the tests that are showing us what we need to see.
Yep.
Like, I'd rather my sprinters can throw a 16-pound shot backwards over their head 40 feet than squat 400 pounds.
Yep.
Honestly, like, if they can do both, awesome.
I think this is a good point to, like, kind of dive into archetype, at least in what we know. At least me, if I had an individual that that was narrow versus an individual that was wide, I would train them differently. I think that there's exercises that fit the needs of that individual better, one, but I also think that there's intensities that fit the intensities, velocities that fit the individuals more importantly. So I know you have experience with this, at least like with the hoopers back at Springfield. I know you broke up into muscular elastic. We didn't necessarily have the chance to kind of individualize and track, but we would measure and we would kind of like identify tendencies. Like, where do you stand on this? Like, when you get a freshman, you get 5 freshmen that come into you, and you can easily identify that 3 of them are wide and 2 are narrow. Is that impacting what you're prescribing?
Yes.
And how?
By the way, Mike, secondary compensation. Mike, you've trained yourself into a wide.
The amount of compressed narrows that I've seen is like unbelievable.
Yes.
But you're slower now. You just trained your ass off just to get slower. Congrats.
Too much bodybuilding. Too much bodybuilding from Mike.
Mike Anderson, you're fast and you could have been faster. James Johannes, I'm sorry because I swore you were narrow.
130.
You're the widest wide I've ever seen, James. But I think it's important, dude. Like, that's going to provide at least some insight into movement strategy, what they prefer, and ultimately, like, how they organize themselves, which is very, very important when it comes to what their skill looks like in the development of it.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, of course that matters, but I also take into account a lot about how they race, how the race looks, and like just pick up on little things through that. So, for example, have one kid who definitely a wide,
Loves accelerating.
29 on the plates.
Yeah. Probably a muscular jump if I like, probably deep range.
ATG.
Ass to grass.
Achilles is about that long.
Yep.
Poor guy. Long calves. Very long calf. Not a lot of Achilles contribution, unfortunately. This is the
loves time on the ground. Benefits from it.
Yes. Accelerates very, very well. Very, very powerful individual. And for him, like, he needs that feedback of feeling strong and explosive in his start.
Right.
That is what's important for him. We know that he needs, he's Kashane.
Sure.
He's got to be in the lead at 60.
Right.
He's got to be in the lead. Now, we both agree that we've improved his top speed this year, but we still need to be in the lead at 60.
Right.
So for him, like, he trained a lot on his own this year. And this is a guy who, this is the most high neural guy I've ever worked with personally. I mean, I think 29 hands on hips on the plates that's pretty special. That's special. And the quote, 48 hours after high intensity session until we can go again. If you ever heard that, does not apply to this guy. We need at least 96.
That's crazy.
It is a high tax, very, very high tax.
Yep.
We can get away with 72, but it's not going to be good. 96 is good. 96 is pretty good. We can even afford 120. We can afford 5
until next week.
We can afford 5 days. So he did. Now I'm completely reworking his program. I would change a lot of the things I did with him this year. I got impatient in the winter and rushed him into things that we didn't need to be worrying about in January. And the nice thing about track is sometimes the racing is the training in a lot of ways. Like, that has to be factored into the plan. Like, in a lot of ways, the indoor season bleeds beautifully into outdoor. So, like, he is someone who should fit perfectly in a short to long program where we can really be patient with acceleration in the beginning of the season, build it out really slowly, get him from 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. We start racing. He's running 60s indoors. That's great. That's taking care of that max velocity piece for us, a little bit of the speed endurance piece for us. As we bleed into outdoor season, we've already run, say we ran 860s indoor throughout the season between prelims, finals, and all the different meets we've been at. And then outdoor, we start racing hundreds. You got a couple weeks between indoor season and outdoor season. Maybe we can tease in some 80s in there, 70s, 80s, 90s. And we're ready to, we're at that point essentially racing. That's kind of like what track coaches will say, racing into shape.
Yep.
I think the hard part with the archetype thing is it can be easy to get confused because we're not saying that not everybody. What am I? You know what I'm trying to say?
That individual that you gave Pride the example of, like, he's not elastic.
Correct.
He is more elastic than 99% of the population.
Yes.
He has to be able to run the times he does.
He's running
right.
fast.
There's elastic components of the body that need to be used efficiently to be fast, or else you're going to leak so much energy and be slow, right? He expresses those qualities.
Yes.
But based on his build and what he favors, there are other aspects of him that make him a special athlete. Right. And I think on the totally other end of that spectrum, you have your gouts.
Yes.
Is he narrow? Just
dude.
Come on, like, he's ridiculously.
That's his Achilles length.
Yep. But these individuals have to be unbelievable. Like, they're just so bouncy. They're so reactive. Like, you watch Gout walk. Like, his heel is this far off the ground all times. And like
that, you can't teach.
The last thing I'm going to do with that guy is put 300 pounds on his back. And I think that's what it comes down to, is like, you have these archetypes that essentially, let's say, prior to any compensatory layers, because I think this could be a good question for after, but based on their build, they prefer certain strategies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Based on those strategies, we can apply a certain stimuli to help drive their superpower. That doesn't mean that, one, they're not good at the kryptonite, and there isn't a place to dose the kryptonite. It's just about when you dose it. So, like, you're just talking about that one kid. You're not running at top speed, right? He may be a more natural accelerator. Doesn't mean that he's not running at top speed, right? That gout, he's probably doing resisted sprinting in some manner. Now, like, the resistance that's applied, I don't know, right? But like, there's a time to continue to dose what they necessarily aren't naturally, organically good at, right? Because dosing that is going to help improve the superpower as well. It's just going to help
enhance especially early,
like off season. Sure. And then
he's so immature.
Yeah. And then I also get, like, when I think about team sport athletes, like, now we're in season, like, I'm favoring what they're good at. I want them to be able to go out there on a day-to-day basis and express what they're already good at. Now, when off season starts, probably a good time to really dose in a lot of that kryptonite, right? I hope that's kind of where you're getting at. Like, that kid is still elastic. He has to
for sure.
Gout is still strong.
Yeah, you can't run over 24 miles an hour and not have some sort of elasticity.
I'm not an expert in this. You know more than me, but you're not an expert as well. We should just have Bill on here. He'll talk, and then I'll have no clue what he said.
I will be more confused.
But we talk about, like, compensatory layers. So, like, you have these guys that are narrows. They favor one thing naturally. They train one way for, however many years, and that strategy changes as a result, or vice versa. If you have an athlete come in that's like that, we're like, this is naturally, like, a pretty bouncy individual. Like, he's very reactive, but, like, I can tell that he's been trained in a different way, and it's kind of pulling from that quality. Are you looking to restore that quality as much as possible, or are you going to continue to feed him what he's used to? I guess that's kind of the question I want to provide, because I think it's a really interesting conversation, man.
Yeah, it is. The first thing I would say is I would have to evaluate how successful has what he's been doing
been for him.
How much has it helped him?
Right. Or how much has it hurt him?
How much has it hurt him? Right. Like, I think about this because every year we're bringing in 17, 18-year-old kids into the program who come from all sorts of different training backgrounds. Some of them have never touched a weight room before. Some of them run, some of the sprinters literally run cross country in high school. And then we have others who are doing resisted sprinting. They're lifting heavy 2-3 times a week. So we get all sorts of different backgrounds for kids, and they get to success in different ways. Now, I think with each kid, when each kid comes in, I have a sort of hypothesis as to what I think might be successful with an individual. And I think what is awesome about track is the demands of the event are never going to change.
Right.
Like, no matter what, there's still going to be things that we have to do to compete.
Yep.
Like in the 400, for example, there are components of that we have to train, whether or not it's, quote, your superpower or not your superpower.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'm limited now is I don't even know what it necessarily looks like to train or to kind of revert someone back to what their, quote, natural tendency would be.
Mm-hmm.
What I would do is, if something's working for someone, I would be an egotistical person to try to change it and say, nah, I know better. I've done that. I did that this year with some people and it didn't work.
Right.
So that was my pride and ego talking. And as a coach, like, you got to check that a lot of times, because you got to put aside your personal agendas and do what's best for the athletes that you're working with and what's best for the team.
I think based on the sport, the training history, the demands, the archetype, and then like the psyche of the athlete as well. I think all of those things are working together to create a distribution of this Venn diagram.
In track, we're literally focusing 100% of our time on speed.
Right.
Whereas you're not. You might be spending 20% of your time on speed. Probably not even.
Yep.
5. And the other is skill specific, like position specific skill.
Yep.
Pitchers are pitching, throwing pens.
Right.
Catchers are catching pens, working on blocking. Yep. Fielders are fielding.
Right.
Throwing, hitting. Like, that is always going to carry more weight in baseball. Whereas if it's not helping us get faster, we're not doing it.
Right.
If I don't think it's helping us get faster, we're not doing it.
Right.
No, I'll take Noah Lyles for an example, right? Okay. If this was 2K or Madden,
yep,
he's a 99 skill on like the skill.
Sure.
Like, him practicing time on mechanics isn't largely moving the needle for him anymore.
Right.
For some of the kids I'm working with, they might be 75 overall skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of movement there there's a lot of progress we can make on skill.
Yep.
For other kids I work with, they have great mechanics. Like, that's not really the low-hanging fruit anymore. That's not really the thing that's going to be helping us improve.
Yeah.
It might shift that might shift more towards the structure, it might shift more towards the software.
And that's when the distribution matters. It's like,
and the other thing is, like in track, like in sprinting, there's skill in different parts of kind of the race, like I was talking about. So you have skill during acceleration, early, mid, late acceleration. You have skill during max velocity, and you have skill during endurance, like the speed endurance component of race. That's different for each event. Speed endurance in the 100 looks a lot different than it does in the 200.
Yep.
Looks a way different than it does in the 400. Watch someone the last 50 meters of a 400. They look very comfortable. And if they do, they didn't run fast enough.
Right. Like, let's talk about pitching. We talk about how everything works together. Like, you might have room for growth in your hardware. Like, you might not be a physical guy. You might be super efficient on the mound. Like, your mechanics might be perfect, right? If you're throwing 97 miles an hour, well, 1, you have to be good enough at the skill to be able to express that. 2, your nervous system has to be efficient enough to be able to produce velocities that high. And 3, like, man, your body is like, you clearly have a physical capacity, a level of robustness and resilience that is impressive enough to handle all of the forces that come with that level of sequencing.
Yeah.
So, like, I think ultimately what I'm trying to get at the end of the day is, like, all of these things work together. You can't have one without the other.
Absolutely not.
You can't want one without the other.
Not at a high level.
But it provides at least a semi framework for us as coaches in understanding which piece may help each individual based on their certain demands in case.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to use systems, at least at this point. Because like it's never one size fits all.
No.
Like we can,
and
if
you shape the system to the person.
for sure,
You do.
for sure.